The alley was narrow, hidden behind the glow of a city that glittered for the few and forgot the rest. Neon signs flickered above closed storefronts, casting long shadows on the cracked pavement below. Amid the distant hum of traffic and the chatter of late-night passers-by, a quiet act of grace unfolded beneath a rusty service light. A young waitress stepped outside with a cardboard box in her arms, kneeling gently to share its contents: warm food, fruit, bread, with 3 small girls who waited silently in the cold. She wasn't trying to be seen. She was just trying to feed 3 hungry souls. Her uniform was stained from a long shift, her feet sore, her tips already spent. But her smile was full and real. What she didn't know was that, from a quiet booth inside the diner, a man in a tailored suit watched everything. And he had the power to change everything. Where are you watching from? This is the story of how unseen kindness becomes unstoppable grace. Danielle Brooks was 28, but her eyes carried years far heavier than the calendar suggested. Each day began before sunrise and ended long after the last coffee cup was rinsed, her apron stained with grease and effort. She worked double shifts at a small urban diner, tucked between 2 aging brick buildings, just a block off the city's main drag. The kind of place where regulars knew each other by name and tips were either generous or non-existent. Danielle smiled through it all, because she had to. Rent didn't wait, and neither did the pain of the past she carried like a second skin. Once a foster kid herself, she knew what it meant to be forgotten, to feel invisible. That's why, when she first saw the 3 little girls huddled near the alley's end on a freezing Tuesday night, clutching each other like lost birds, she didn't hesitate. Their names were Anna, Bella, and Grace, sisters no older than 9, with tangled hair and eyes that had seen too much. They didn't say much, just nodded when offered food, and kept glancing toward the street like someone might come to take them away. Danielle understood that look too well. She began bringing them warm leftovers between tables, slipping out the back door on short breaks to make sure they had something hot in their hands. Inside the diner, the usual shuffle of plates and chatter filled the air. But at the far corner booth, a man sat alone. Sharp suit, silver beard, and eyes that missed nothing. He always ordered the same thing: black coffee, no cream, no sugar. He came at the same time every evening, sat in silence, and tipped far more than the bill ever demanded. Danielle noticed him, of course, but never paid him much mind. She assumed he was just another quiet businessman avoiding rush hour. What she didn't know was that he never came for the coffee. His eyes often lingered past the kitchen door, watching her disappear out back with a takeout box in hand. There was no judgment in his gaze, only curiosity. Quiet, calculated, and waiting. Why was he always watching? Who was he? Danielle didn't know, and for now she didn't have time to wonder. The girls were hungry again. And kindness in her world couldn't afford delay. The first time Danielle truly saw them, they were sitting on a flattened cardboard box, tucked beside the dumpster behind the diner. The wind cut through the alley like a blade, and the smallest girl, Grace, was shivering in a hoodie 2 sizes too small. Danielle stopped in her tracks, heart tight in her chest. "Hey," she said softly, crouching down. "You okay?" Anna, the oldest, nodded stiffly, but her eyes flicked nervously toward the street. "We're fine," she said quickly. Danielle could hear the fear behind the words. They weren't just hiding from the cold. They were hiding from something else entirely. She didn't press. Instead, she went back inside and packed a takeout box with anything hot she could spare. No one noticed the extra plate. When she returned, she handed it to them with a quiet smile. "You don't have to talk," she said, "just eat while it's warm." Bella, the middle one, took it with both hands like it might disappear. They didn't say thank you. They didn't have to. Danielle had once been the girl who didn't trust kind strangers either. The next night, they were there again, tucked deeper in the shadows this time, their eyes brighter but still wary. Danielle brought 2 boxes this time, filled with soup and warm bread. She asked their names, and after a pause, Anna answered. "We're sisters," she said. "We're just waiting for someone." Danielle didn't push further. She knew a lie used for protection when she heard one. Over the next week, the alley became their sanctuary. Danielle started slipping out during her 10-minute breaks, carrying whatever leftovers she could piece together, half a sandwich here, a slice of pie there. Once, she used her own tip money to buy 3 pairs of wool socks from the dollar store down the street. The next night, she knelt in front of them and helped pull the socks over their tiny feet with hands that trembled, not from cold, but from remembering what it felt like to receive when you expected nothing. Inside the diner, everything went on as usual. Customers came and went, orders rang out from the kitchen, and Danielle moved through it all with practiced rhythm. But at the corner booth, the man in the tailored suit kept coming back. Every night, like clockwork, he ordered his black coffee and sat in silence. Sometimes he brought a briefcase, sometimes a newspaper. But his eyes always drifted toward the back of the diner, just for a second, just long enough to catch Danielle slipping out the door with a box in her hands. She never noticed him. Not really. To her, he was just another quiet tipper with expensive shoes and a polite nod. She had more important things on her mind, like making sure Anna, Bella, and Grace had something warm in their stomachs before the city took notice and swept them away. The alley behind the diner was filthy, filled with graffiti and broken glass. But in those nights, it became something else, a place of healing, a space where nothing was asked and everything given meant something. In that narrow strip of forgotten city, kindness was alive. And someone with power and eyes that missed nothing, was watching it all unfold. It was a Thursday evening when everything unraveled. The diner was busier than usual, the sound of clinking plates and murmured conversations filling the air like static. Danielle moved between tables with the grace of habit, her apron already marked with the evidence of a long day. She had just packed a to-go box of leftover stew and slid it discreetly onto the back counter when her manager, Carla, called her name, loudly, sharply. "Danielle, office, now." Inside the cramped, overheated office, the air felt heavier than usual. Carla stood with arms folded, lips tight, and beside her was Henry, a smug-faced line cook who had always kept score. "He says you've been stealing food," Carla said flatly, "giving it to some kids behind the building." Danielle's stomach dropped. She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. "They're hungry, Carla. I only gave them leftovers, things we would have thrown out." "That's not your call to make," Carla snapped. "We have rules, and insurance, and health codes. You want to run a charity. Do it somewhere else." There was a beat of silence where Danielle felt the floor tilt beneath her. She didn't cry, she wouldn't, but the heat rising in her face had nothing to do with shame. "You're really going to fire me? For feeding kids?" That's when the booth door creaked open. The quiet man in the corner, who had sat unnoticed for weeks, sipping black coffee and watching with eyes that missed nothing, stepped forward. His tailored suit seemed to draw every gaze in the room. He walked slowly, confidently, until he stood in the office doorway, his expression calm but cutting. "She's not the problem here," he said. Carla blinked. Excuse me? I've been watching her do more for this world with nothing, the man said, voice steady, than most people do with everything. There was silence. Every employee within earshot stopped moving. Even Henry paled. The man turned toward Danielle and offered the faintest smile. You didn't know I was watching. That's what made it real. He looked back to Carla. How much does she owe you for the food? Carla stammered. I don't know. Maybe double it, he said. I'll pay it now. He pulled out a sleek black wallet and handed over a business card with a metallic edge. And if you ever threaten to fire her again, I'll buy this diner outright and hand her the keys. Carla's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Danielle stood frozen, confused, stunned. Her mind raced. I don't understand. Who are you? He turned to her, his tone softening. Just someone who believes in what you did. That's all that matters. She stared at him, heart pounding. She wanted to ask more, to understand why someone like him would defend someone like her. But all she said was, Thank you. No need, he replied. You were already doing what most people wouldn't. I just gave it a louder voice. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out of the office, disappearing into the night like he was never there. Danielle didn't chase him. She didn't even try to explain to the stunned staff left behind. She just went to the back counter, picked up the warm box of food she'd packed, and slipped out into the alley, because the girls were waiting, and kindness doesn't stop for applause. The next morning, Danielle was back behind the counter, bleary-eyed and distracted, still reeling from the night before. The kitchen clattered around her, orders flew in, and customers filtered through like any other day, but something felt different. She kept glancing toward the alley, wondering if the girls had found somewhere safer to sleep, somewhere warmer. She hadn't seen them that morning, and the worry sat like a stone in her chest. Around noon, the rumble of engines outside drew curious glances from diners. Danielle peeked through the front window and froze. 3 sleek, black SUVs had pulled up across the street, windows tinted, paint gleaming under the winter sun. Her breath caught. She felt her stomach twist. SUVs like that didn't stop in neighborhoods like this unless something serious was about to happen. Her first thought was child services. Someone must have reported the girls. Maybe Carla, maybe Henry, maybe someone who saw them out back. Panic bloomed in her throat. She dropped her towel and rushed to the door, heart hammering. But it wasn't child services. The back door of the lead SUV opened and out stepped the man from the booth. No longer in shadows, no longer sipping coffee in silence. He wore a long charcoal coat over a navy suit, his stride purposeful, flanked by 2 assistants who carried leather folders and tablets. He walked straight toward her, calm as ever. "Danielle," he said gently, as if greeting an old friend, "I hope I didn't frighten you." She stared at him, stunned. What is this?" He smiled faintly. "My name is Ethan Royce. I'm the CEO of Royce Holdings, real estate, infrastructure, social equity investment initiatives, and lately, observer of good people doing good things." Danielle couldn't find her voice. She stood rooted to the sidewalk, the cold forgotten. "I came because I have something to offer," he continued. "First, I've already contacted a legal team about Anna, Bella, and Grace. They'll ensure the girls receive care, housing, and safety, without getting lost in the system." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Second, I heard what you told Lila, your co-worker, that you once dreamed of opening a shelter for kids like they are." Danielle's eyes welled before she could stop them. "I want to help make that dream real," he said softly. "Fully funded, staffed, built under your direction, in your name, if you want." She blinked, swallowing hard, her voice breaking. Why me? Ethan looked around, his gaze settling on the narrow alley just behind them where it all began. The place where cardboard boxes became makeshift dinner tables, where she knelt and gave quietly, night after night. Because you gave them everything, he said, when you had nothing. She looked back toward the alley, her vision blurred, but in her mind she could still see the girls smiling through hunger, the warmth she gave them in place of blankets. And now, here in that same space, this forgotten corner behind the city's noise, was where kindness came back full circle. The alley where she gave had become the place she received. Months passed, and the chill of winter slowly gave way to the soft bloom of spring, but the alley behind the diner remained sacred in Danielle's memory, a place where everything had changed quietly, without announcement. She no longer wore an apron or carried plates to weary booths. Instead, she now carried purpose in both hands, wrapped in a life she'd never dared to imagine, but had quietly earned through the smallest, most honest acts. Ethan Royce had kept his word with quiet precision. Danielle was granted a full scholarship to study social work at the city's best university, classes structured around her new responsibilities. She was nervous at first, returning to school in her late 20s, balancing coursework with caretaking. But every time she watched Anna, Bella, and Grace sitting safely at the breakfast table in the cozy apartment Ethan's foundation helped her secure, all doubt faded. The girls were no longer shadows hiding from the world. They were registered, cared for, laughing more freely each day. Under her care, their edges softened. Their eyes no longer darted for exits. Danielle filed the paperwork to become their official foster guardian. She did it with trembling hands, knowing what it meant and what it might take, but also knowing that she had already done the hardest part, loving them without being asked. Soon after, construction began on a renovated brick building just 5 blocks from the diner. Ethan had purchased the abandoned warehouse in secret, quietly transferring ownership to Danielle's nonprofit, a shelter and youth program they would call the Alley Light. The name had been hers, a tribute to where it all began, not in front of cameras, but beside dumpsters, not in grand gestures, but in borrowed warmth, a light in a place no one saw coming. The day it opened, a ribbon was cut not with press or fanfare, but with Danielle standing before a small crowd of neighbors, former foster kids, local volunteers, and a man in a navy coat who preferred to stand in the back. She didn't speak for long, only enough to say that hope doesn't always come through doors. Sometimes it finds you in alleys, in winter, in moments where no one else is looking. Later that week, Danielle found herself back behind the diner, not to serve food, but to share it. A small boy sat on a milk crate, his jacket torn, knees muddy. Without a word, she knelt beside him and placed a warm meal into his hands. "You okay, sweetheart?" she asked gently. The boy looked up, surprised, then nodded. Her smile hadn't changed, but her coat had. It was new now, clean, sturdy, the kind you buy when you don't have to choose between warmth and rent. She tucked the boy's collar higher against the breeze, brushed his hair from his face. From behind her, Ethan's voice reached out, soft and knowing. You didn't know anyone was watching. But sometimes the right eyes see everything. Danielle looked over her shoulder and met his gaze, not with awe this time, but with something deeper, understanding, gratitude, partnership. That night, she stood before her bathroom mirror in the small apartment she now shared with the girls. She stared at her reflection, not to fix her hair or study the circles beneath her eyes, but to really see herself. And for the first time in her life, She didn't see a waitress. She didn't see a survivor. She saw a changemaker, a mother, a woman who bent without breaking, who gave without needing credit, who built something lasting from scraps of faith. And it all started with a simple truth. Kindness doesn't need an audience. It just needs to show up. She wasn't trying to be seen. She wasn't hoping for applause or chasing recognition. She was just doing what felt right. Feeding hungry children, offering warmth on cold nights, giving more of herself than she had to give. But someone saw her. And because of that, Danielle Brooks was given something rare, the chance to turn her quiet kindness into a legacy. A home for the girls who reminded her of herself. A shelter for the lost and overlooked. A future she never thought she'd live to create. She wasn't trying to be seen, but someone saw her and gave her the world she was always trying to build for others. Have you ever done something good, even when no one was looking? What if someone was? If this story warmed your heart, share it with someone who still believes in kindness. Stay tuned for more stories where compassion changes everything, and where the smallest acts spark the biggest transformations. Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay generous, stay unseen, stay unforgettable.